everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how to solve multi-step equations. So as we go through this, I'm going to be giving you my recommended order of steps as you work through these. If you follow these steps, you should have no problem solving any of the equations that you're given. However, it's important to remember that with equations, there can be a couple different ways to solve depending on the question itself. But I'm going to walk you through this process here just to give you my preferred roadmap. So I like to start with distributing. So I'm going to distribute if I have to. And the way that I'm going to know whether I have to or not is that I'm going to look for parentheses. So remember, distributing is when I'm taking a number outside the parentheses and I'm multiplying it by however many terms are on the inside. So if I look at my first example here, I don't have any parentheses in this one, so I don't actually have to distribute. As you're following this roadmap, if you get to a step that does not need to be completed, for example, in this first one, I don't need to distribute because I don't have any parentheses, I can just move on to the next step. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute. I notice in my second example that I do have parentheses, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that by distributing through those. So I'm going to take my outside number 5, and I'm going to multiply it by any terms that are here on the inside. So I'm going to do 5 times y. Remember, when I'm multiplying, this y is actually a 1y. And when I'm multiplying a regular number by a variable term, I'm going to just multiply the two outside numbers, and then I'm going to bring the variable with it. So I'm going to do 5 times 1, which is 5, and y is going to come down. Then I'm going to do 5 times negative 2. Make sure you're being careful of your signs here. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Now, that's the end of my distributing. I've gone through my parentheses. I don't have any other parentheses, so everything else can just come down. Negative 7y comes down equals negative 32. So my first step is going to be to get rid of any parentheses I have by distributing. My second step, after I distribute, is going to be to combine like terms. Now remember that like terms have the same variables or no variable at all. So I'm going to combine any terms that are the same. The one caveat with this is that I need to make sure that those terms are on the same side. So I'm going to continue working through this second example. So I've got 5y here, and as I look, I've got a negative 10 and a negative 7y. My 5y and my negative 7y are like terms. They are both y terms. So I can combine those by adding the coefficients, by adding the numbers that are in front. So I do 5 plus negative 7. 5 plus negative 7 is negative 2y. And remember that that y just comes along. Now, my negative 10 does not have any other plain numbers on this equation. Even though I have negative 32 over here, that's just a plain number, I can't combine terms that are on different sides of the equation. So as I'm looking just on this side, my negative 10 is the only number that I have, so I can just bring it down. Same thing over here for my negative 32. It can't be combined with anything, so it just comes down. Once I've distributed and combined like terms, now this is a two-step equation. So now I go into what we've been practicing in terms of adding or subtracting in order to get that variable term by itself. So once I have a two-step equation like this, I'm going to add or subtract to isolate the variable term. Now remember, the variable term is your variable and anything that is connected to that variable. So in this case, my variable is y, and my variable term is everything connected to that y. So negative 2y is my variable term. Currently, that's not by itself. Right now, that negative 10 is keeping that box from being alone. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides so that I can get rid of that. My 10s are going to go away. I haven't done anything to negative 2y, so negative 2y comes down. Then I just solve this over here. So negative 32 plus 10 is negative 22. Make sure that you're checking those calculations in a calculator or in Desmos. Okay, so as you're working through these, you should have Desmos pulled up, or you should have a calculator that you have access to, so that you can just type negative 32 plus 10 to double check your work. So negative 22 is my answer over here. So once I've done that, my very last step, just like when I'm solving two-step equations, is to multiply or divide so that I can get my variable by itself. Okay, so now my variable term is alone, negative 2y is by itself. Now that my variable term is alone, I also want to get my variable alone. So right now this is negative 2 times y. Remember, a number directly next to a variable tells you to multiply. So this is negative 2 times y. I want to undo that multiplication by dividing. And I want to get rid of that negative 2, so I'm going to divide by negative 2. Remember that anything I do to one side, I've got to do to the other side. So my negative 2's reduced to 1, and I'm left with just y. Negative 22 divided by negative 2. Make sure you're being really careful when you get to negatives here. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm really checking that. So negative 22 divided by negative 2 is positive 11. Okay, remember that you can always go back and check your work by plugging it back into the original equation. So if I've got 5 parentheses y, I think y is 11, so I'm going to plug in 11 there, minus 2, close my parentheses, minus 7 times 11. And I want that to be equal to negative 32. Equals, try to squeeze it in here. There we go. So I'm going to check that by putting this whole thing into the calculator in Desmos to see if it's equal to negative 32. So I've got 5, a parentheses that's already there. My y is 11. I want to make sure I put parentheses around that. Minus 2, close parentheses. Minus 7y. Y is 11. I want to make sure I use parentheses. And that does equal negative 32. So I found that negative 32 equals negative 32, which is great. Okay, it may take a little bit of time, but it's important that you're checking your answers as you go. Let's look at another example. So like I mentioned already, in this first example, normally my first step is to distribute. In this case, I do not need to distribute because I don't have any parentheses. So I can skip that step and move right into my combining like terms. Remember that I'm going to look at each side individually. So I'm going to look on this side and see if I can combine anything. I'm going to look on this side and see if I can combine anything. So 19 and 7 are both regular old numbers, no variables there, so I can combine those by adding them together. 19 plus 7 is 26. On the other side, I've got a 10, a negative 5w, and a 9w. This negative 5w and this 9w are like terms, so I can combine those by adding the numbers that are in front. Negative 5 plus 9. Again, make sure you're using Desmos. If you're unsure about your calculations, negative 5 plus 9 gives me 4. So 4w. And then again, I have a 10 here, but there are no other regular numbers on that side of the equal sign. While I have regular numbers over here, they're not on the same side, so I cannot combine those. I'm just going to bring down my plus 10. Okay. From here, now I have a two-step equation. So I'm going to find my variable term and get that by itself. My variable term is 4w. It's my variable and anything connected to it. And I'm going to ask myself, is 4w all by itself on one side of the equation? The answer, of course, is no, because I have this plus 10. I get rid of a plus 10 by subtracting 10 on both sides. My 4w stays where it is. I didn't do anything to it. I didn't change it in any way. My positive 10 and my negative 10 are going to reduce to 0, so I don't need to write anything there. 26 minus 10 is 16. So now I've isolated my variable term, my 4w. So now I can isolate my variable. Once my variable term is by itself, I want to get the variable by itself. My variable is w. I need w to come away from 4. So right now this is 4 times w. I'm going to undo that multiplying by dividing. 4 is the number I want to get rid of, so 4 is the number I want to divide by. 16 divided by 4 is 4. You can do that in a calculator or in Desmos. 4w divided by 4, my 4's are going to reduce to 1, so those are going to go away, and my w is all that's left over. Okay. Remember that we can check this. I start with my original equation, 19 plus 7 equals 10 minus 5, w. I think w is 4, so I'm going to plug that in with parentheses, plus 9, w again, so I'm going to plug that in with parentheses. And I'm going to check to see if these two sides do equal one another. So 19 plus 7 is on one side. 19 plus 7 gives me 26. And I want to know, is that equal to all of this? So I'm going to check that by plugging it in. 10 minus 5, parentheses 4, close it, plus 9, parentheses 4, close it. That equals 26. These two sides are equal to one another, so my check is correct. Okay, I'm not going to show you how to check each one of these, but you should be checking them as you walk through the solving. So we're going to look at 2 more examples. We're going to look at 4 more examples, and then I'm going to give you some time to practice on your own. So remembering the steps can be a little bit difficult. So sometimes I like to use a little acronym. Don't call after midnight. Okay? Don't call after midnight. If you can remember these 4 steps, you can remember how to solve even the most complex of multi-step equations. So remember that my D stands for distribute. So let's look at number 1. I know that I need to distribute when I have parentheses. So I have no parentheses in number 1, so I don't need to distribute at all. C stands for combine like terms. That are on the same side. So if I take a look at this side, I have a P term and I have a regular old number term, nothing to combine there. On the other side, I have just a number term, so I'm good there. A tells me to add or subtract. To isolate my variable term. Okay, well, P is my variable, so 2/3 P is my variable term. It's the variable, plus everything connected to it. So 2/3 P is not currently by itself. We have this negative 25 that's keeping it from being alone. So I'm going to undo that by adding 25 to both sides. My 25s are going to reduce to 0. 2/3 P, I didn't do anything to it, so it comes right down. 115 plus 25 is 140. Now my variable term is alone, so my last step is to multiply or divide to get my variable alone. My variable here is P. That is 2/3 times P. So I'm going to undo 2/3 times P by dividing by 2/3. 2/3 is what I want to get rid of, so 2/3 is what I'm going to divide by. If I do it on one side, I have to do it on the other side. Now, this looks scary, but Desmos can do this without a problem. So I know that my 2/3 are going to reduce out. They're going to reduce to 1. That was the whole point of me dividing by 2/3 to begin with. So those fractions are going to cancel, and my P is going to come down. 140 divided by 2/3. Okay, again, like I said, it looks weird in Desmos, but this here is doing exactly what this is doing. And my answer here is 210. As always, you can plug it back in to check to see if it's correct. Okay. Now, number 2 looks interesting. And when we did examples sort of like this before, we did something like x minus 5 over 6 equals 12. Some whole number on the side that I could multiply this 6 so that I can get rid of that fraction. But this is a little different because it's got fractions on both sides of the equal sign. It has a fraction over here and a fraction over here. Okay? These are questions that you actually have seen before and have worked with before. They are the same as something like 2/3 equals x over 9. Okay, so back in 7th grade, you started working with proportions, and we talked about cross-multiplying and dividing to solve. So anytime you have a fraction equal to another fraction, you can cross-multiply. And you're doing exactly what that says. You're taking the denominator of one, the bottom number, and you're multiplying it by the top number of the other. So here I'm doing 6 times 2. Now you can do 6 times 2, or you can do 6 times 2. Okay, I just want you to write the cross multiplication out, and then we'll do the rest of the solving. So I do 6 times 2 on one side of the equal sign. On the other side, I'm going to take the denominator of the other one, and I'm going to multiply it by the numerator of the first. I'm doing 3 times x minus 5. Now, it's 3 times this whole thing. So it needs to be 3 times this whole thing. Okay? Once you write it like that, now you can follow Don't Come After Midnight to solve this. My first step is to distribute. I do need to distribute in number 2 because I do have those parentheses that I need to get rid of. So I'm going to multiply my outside number times my inside number. 6 times 2 equals 12. My equal sign comes down. And then I'm going to repeat this on the opposite side. 3 times x gives me 3x. 3 times negative 5, remember that's a negative, is negative 15. My variables have disappeared, my parentheses have disappeared, so I'm done with distributing. I'm going to check to see if I can combine my terms. Well, over here I only have a number, nothing to combine there. Over here I have an x term and a number term. Number terms are called constants, so I have an x term and a constant. Those two cannot be combined, so I don't have any combining to do here. So I can move right into getting my variable term alone. My variable is x, my variable term is 3x. Remember the variable and anything touching it. And that is not alone right now. That negative 15 is keeping 3x from being alone. So I'm going to add 15 to both sides so that I can undo that minus 15. Okay. 12 plus 15 gives me 27 on this side. 3x is going to come down, and then my 15s are going to reduce to 0. Lastly, I got 3x alone. Now I want just x. I'm going to get rid of the 3 by dividing on both sides, and I get 9 equals x. Okay, you can check that by plugging it back in, but remember that the order of this doesn't matter. X equals 9 is the same as 9 equals x. Okay, so don't let this being backwards stress you out. All right, we're going to look at 2 more examples that are a little more detailed, and then I'm going to let you try a few examples on your own. So number 3. My first step is going to be to see if I need to distribute. In number 3, I'm looking for those parentheses, and I see them right here. So I do need to distribute. My y is not part of my distributing, so it's just going to come down. If you want to put a 1 in front of that y because that makes you feel better, go for it. Then I'm going to get rid of these parentheses by multiplying my outside number. -3 times 2y. -3 times 2 is -6, and y comes with it. -3 times -7. -3 times -7 is +21, and then equals 76 comes down. The only thing I did was get rid of these parentheses by distributing. Everything else stays the same. Then I'm going to combine like terms. On this side, I've got a 1y and a -6y and a 21. My 1y and my -6y are like terms. They both have y. So I can combine them by adding their numbers together. 1 plus -6 is -5y. My +21, there are no other numbers on that side of the equation. So 21 cannot be combined with anything. It just comes down. It's okay that 76 is over here, but I can't combine them because they are not on the same side. Once I've done that, I'm going to get my variable term alone. My variable term is -5y. Y is my variable, everything connected to it, which means I need to get rid of this 21. I'm going to undo the adding by subtracting, and I have to do that on both sides. -5y comes down. My 21s are going to reduce to 0. 76 minus 21 is going to give me 55. Last thing I have to do is get my variable alone. My variable is y. It is not alone right now because that -5 is there with it. So I'm going to divide by whatever I'm trying to get rid of, which is -5. My -5s are going to reduce to 1, so y is going to be left over. 5 divided by -5 is -11. Again, check that in your calculator, and you can check it by plugging it back in. Okay. Last example that I'm going to show you, I'm going to distribute first. I know that I need to distribute because I have parentheses here, and I know I need to distribute more than once because I have more than one set of parentheses. 15 is not part of that, so it's just going to come down. Then I'm going to deal with each of these individually. So here's my first distributing, here's my second distributing. It's whatever is inside the parentheses and whatever is directly touching it on the outside. So in my first set, I'm going to do 3 times m is 3m. 3 times -2 is -6. Now, number 4 is tricky because there doesn't appear to be a number there in front. Here in my second set of parentheses, it doesn't feel like there's anything in front of there. But this minus sign shows me that there actually is a -1 there in the front. Okay? So I'm going to do -1 times m is -1m. -1 times +3 is -3. So I've distributed. We can move on to combining like terms. Again, I only want to look on each side of the equation separately. So on this side, I only have 15. On this side, I have a 3m and a -1m. Both of those have m's, so they are like terms. I combine those by adding their coefficients. 3 plus -1 is 2m. Again, make sure you're checking those calculations in Desmos or in your calculator. And then I actually have a constant, -6, and a constant, -3. No variables on either of those, just plain old numbers. So I can actually put those together as well. -6 plus -3 is -9. Now, my variable term is 2m. M is the variable, 2m is the variable term. It's not by itself, so I'm going to add 9 to get rid of that -9. 15 plus 9 is 16. Nope, it's 26. Nope, it's 24. Make sure you're checking your calculations in a calculator or in Desmos, because for those exact reasons that I just showed you, it's very easy to make little calculation mistakes, and that'll throw off your whole problem. So make sure you're checking these. 15 plus 9 is 24. 2m hasn't changed at all, so it's just going to come down. My positive 9 and my negative 9 are going to reduce to 0. And then the last thing I want to do is get my variable alone. My variable is m. Right now it's not alone because it's being multiplied by 2. So I'm going to undo that by dividing by 2. 24 divided by 2 is 12. My 2's are going to reduce to 1, and m is going to be left by itself. Okay? So remember that you can always check these by plugging them back into the original equation, using parentheses, and making sure that you get a true statement. Okay? So the independent practice, I did include a little reminder of the steps. And remember that you should be completing these in order. Now, there is some wiggle room in terms of some different problems you can do differently. You can move different things. But if you want just a regular roadmap to follow, this is the order that you should be doing these. Okay? So right now, what I'd like for you to do is to try 5, 6, 7, and 8 in your notes. Okay, I'll leave this little reminder up so that you can see it. But I want you to try 5, 6, 7, and 8 on your own. And then I want you to come back here and check your answers against my answers. All right, so your answers for 5 and 6. For 5, you should have gotten x equals negative 4. For 6, you should have gotten 5 equals x, or x equals 5, either is okay. A couple of things to keep in mind for number 5. Make sure that you're being careful when you combine your like terms. Negative 4x plus negative 3x is negative 7x. Negative 7 plus positive 4 is negative 3. So make sure you're checking those calculations in a calculator or in Desmos. For 7 and 8, number 7, be careful here. This is a negative 5 being distributed. You should have gotten your answer is m equals negative 16. For number 8, this is one of those cross-multiplying problems. I have a fraction on this side and a fraction on that side. So I'm going to multiply the bottom number of one by the top of another. So 3 times all of this. Then 6 times anything that's up here. So 3 times all of that, 6 times 4. And then I just solve this the same way I've solved the other ones. Multiply to distribute through and solve from there. With that in mind, go ahead and complete 9 and 10. Show your work on your paper, and then come back here to check your answers. All right, for number 9, you should have gotten negative 4. A couple things, make sure you're keeping a negative sign on that 4. Watch your signs. Negative times a negative gives you a positive 4. For number 10, you should have gotten b equals 5. The only tricky thing here is to make sure that you're doing the distributing in this set. So 2 times 3b is 6b. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. And then when you're doing the distributing in this set, this is actually a 1 out here on the outside. So that should be 1 times b, which is 1b, or just b. And then 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. 6 plus 1 gives you that 7. Again, watch your signs. Negative 2 plus negative 3 is negative 5. So if you have any additional questions, make sure you write them down and bring them to class, and I will see you soon.